What's the next move, Dolly?
Good morning. That sentence that was just handed down by this court was obscene. That number was obnoxious. There are murderers who will get out of court faster than Harvey Weinstein will. That number spoke to the pressure of movements and the public. That number did not speak to the evidence that came out at trial. That number did not speak to the testimony that we heard. That number did not speak to evidence, nor did it speak to justice. I am overcome with anger at that number. I think that number is a cowardly number to give. I think the judge caved, just as I believe the jury caved, and I am not happy. I will take questions.
Donna, what was Harvey's reaction, and when you were talking that time with him outside of the court, what did he tell you?
Well, I think it was very clear that nothing we did or said today was going to make a difference. I think it shows exactly what has been shown from the beginning with Judge Burke. Judge Burke was already prepared to say and do exactly what he was going to say and do, no matter what we said today. I think it has shown a pattern in this case from the very beginning. Mr. Weinstein really never had a fair shake from day one. And I'm not here to say that he's a victim, and I'm not here to say poor Harvey. But what I am here to say is we were looking for fairness, and we didn't get it.
What does this sentence represent for you? What does it represent for you?
Total unfairness and a complete lack of acknowledgement of what the facts and evidence of this case actually showed. I think the judge took things into consideration that never should have been taken into consideration, especially when we know in a prior case recently, the judge gave someone in a much worse circumstance 7.5 years.
So he said he felt remorse for the situation.
Anybody else?
Donna,
Harvey feels, it's a terrible, of course it's too harsh, it's ridiculous. Harvey feels terrible, of course he does. This is not an easy day. We hope that this sentence will speak to the appellate court in a way that will show that this has been unfair from the very beginning. And here's just one more thing that we can add to the list of things that did not show a fair, just, and impartial trial.
Does he think he's a victim? Does he think he's a victim? What's the next step?
Well, yeah, sure. The appellate court will be able to review this once the appeal is filed. Obviously, that can't happen until now this portion of the case is done, and we'll go from there. Well, sure. There's a lot of issues, I think. Yeah, exactly. Damon's saying like this. I think from the very beginning of this case, from the ruling on the Malinaw witnesses, I think the way that the jury was selected, the fact that we asked to question people individually, discovery violations, Sandoval, juror number 11, extreme sentences, so we can go on and on. Anybody else? Well, there was a Sandoval ruling in this case that the judge had made. It was closed to the public, and in that ruling, the judge was going to allow a lot of things in that didn't have anything to do with sexual assault, but just who Harvey is as a person. And we believe that those things would have been so detrimental that his testimony could have then been a problem. So we had to weigh that out. So as much as I think he would have loved to tell his story, in many ways he was barred from doing so by that ruling.
He talked about the friendship. He described this friendship he had with women. He characterized that.
Well, sure. You have to look at this. I think we all know that based on the evidence in this case, and I think for all of the jurors, the journalists, if you were really being honest and truthful with yourselves, you sat in that courtroom for weeks on end. You listened to the testimony. And I think most of you that I've spoken to privately have been very candid with me about the fact that you were surprised by this verdict, given the fact that there was other relationships. And I think if you look at that and you look at Harvey himself, Harvey, I think, is very confused. I think he feels very sad. I think he believed he had relationships with women that were different than the way they are now characterizing them. And if you look at their conversations via email, it would be realistic to believe that. If you looked at the way Jessica spoke about him on recorded conversations with other people, it would be realistic to believe that. If you look at Jessica's testimony when she said, yes, I was manipulative of him. Yes, I made him think these things. How did he know? That's the question. So I think he sits there very confused. It's very easy to say all these horrible things about him. But I think if you look at the circumstances in real time and you say, wait a minute, what was really going on? It's easy to come in here now and make a show and come with your lawyers and run to Good Morning America. It's easy to do that. We don't know what happened in those rooms. But what we do know is all of the circumstances that surrounded it. And I will never be able to reconcile that all of those circumstances that surrounded it are what normal, regular rape victims do.
Why
I can't hear it.
Why is it so confusing to understand and know what is?
It's not about that. It's like no one was in those rooms at the time. And our job here, whether it's the jury, the judge, trier of fact, has to determine whether the accounts that people told are reasonable and beyond a reasonable doubt match the threshold. And I'm saying that we don't know what happened in those rooms, but we do know all of the other things that surrounded those circumstances. So that makes us question, at least me and many other people that I talk to, about the veracity of the statements they then made.
How did you feel about him speaking?
I'm happy that Harvey spoke. I'm happy that Harvey spoke. Harvey has been silent for years. I think Harvey could have said anything today and it wouldn't have mattered. The judge knew exactly what he was going to give him. So from Harvey's perspective, Harvey needed to do that, and I'm glad that he was able to do so.
I know apology to the victim.
Your client is about to begin. How will you assure his safety at Rikers Island?
Well, I wish I could assure his safety, but that's the Department of Corrections' responsibility. So hoping that they will do that. So far everybody has handled him, I think, fairly and very well. He's not getting any special treatment.
Did you know what he was about to say today at all?
Yeah, of course.
Did you
Of course.
counsel him on that?
At this juncture, I don't think counsel is really something that matters. I think he was able to speak and say what he needed to say, and I was fine with that.
Donna, you mentioned new health issues. What are the new health issues?
He has a right to some privacy, and so I'm not going to get into what those are. As you all know, he underwent a heart procedure, and during that procedure, they found some other issues, and they're going to have to deal with those.
Donna, why did he not apologize?
Well, I think when you have an appeal going on, remember, Harvey Weinstein has asserted his innocence, and he's going to continue to do so. So while an appeal is going on, he's not going to change his position on those issues. So that's why.
Where
Do
do you
you think the appeal is going to be filed?
It depends. Probably July.
Donna, looking back, anything different that the defense team would have done with their strategy?
I don't think there's anything different we could have done. We were faced with the evidence. We had to address that evidence, and that's exactly what we did. I'll let you ask Damon some questions now.
That's all right.
Anybody else?
Given Harvey's age, do you think there's any chance of early murder?
No, when you look at somebody in Harvey's age and his health, you have to look at whether or not the judge is giving him a life sentence, right? So in New York, I think the New York lawyers can speak to that. He has to serve the majority of that sentence. I echo Donna's comments about the fairness of it, but I don't think the court accurately took that into account.
How do you think
What's
Harvey
next with LA?
Weinstein is going to handle his sentence?
Harvey's tougher than a lot of you may think. Harvey Weinstein has gone through 2.5 years of this media intensity, a jury trial. He's been very fine with us. I think he's going to handle it like anybody handles it who gets incarcerated. He's going to do the best he can.
What are you guys hearing about LA? What's next? Have they been in contact?
We don't. Whenever LA is in contact with New York, we don't hear about it. We're not sure. And according to some people in New York, they never talk about anything.
But it's not clear if they're going to take Harvey today.
We don't know.
coming days.
We don't know.
What is the leadership alleged contribution to lessen the effects of Sandy?
Sure. When somebody gets sentenced by a judge, the judge is supposed to take into consideration not just the crimes of conviction, but mitigating circumstances, things that people have done in the past that are laudable. So when a criminal defendant is sentenced, it's not just, well, what did Jessica Mann say? You also have to look at their past and other instances of charitable contributions and things like that. So it's completely appropriate for his lawyers to raise those issues at a sentencing hearing.
What facility is he referring to?
One where his health can be taken care of appropriately.
Fishkill, New York, there's a hospital. I just wanted to thank the New York State court officers and the people who run this building, the clerks in the courtroom and the stenographers in the courtroom. As the representative of New York, I wanted to show my Chicago colleagues the best of New York, and I really felt like those people who work in this courthouse, and many of you in the media who are here on a regular basis, really showed off how great this city is. Of course, our criminal justice system here in New York, one of the ways it's judged is how we treat people who are really reviled, who are people who are really not very popular, or maybe the most hated people in the world. And those people are supposed to deserve the same fairness that everyone else deserves. Justice is supposed to be blind. And because today the New York City criminal justice system saw a sentence handed down that is 3 times the mean of the state average. That includes people who are predicate felons, meaning they have multiple felony convictions, unlike Mr. Weinstein. Those people are getting 8 years, and Mr. Weinstein is possibly getting 23 years. That was not a part of the New York City criminal justice system that I was proud to show my colleagues from Chicago.
Well, I will say, too, we are so grateful to the court staff. Damon and I have been treated with the utmost respect by the court sergeants and clerks and people that work in this building. We have actually enjoyed our time in New York, but we are very, very much looking forward to going home. Anybody else?
Any comment about those court documents Bob Weinstein called his brother?
Yeah, yes, I will make comments about those documents. The unbelievable release that happened the day before we were coming for sentencing, I think, again, shows the unbelievable lack of fairness that was given to Harvey Weinstein. There was no reason that those things needed to be released the day before. I think it's a shame. I think that there were problems in the company. There are problems between brothers. I think it's very sad. It's one other issue that Harvey will have to deal with as he works toward his redemption. And it was a totally unjust situation that those were released. I'm not commenting on it.
What does the sentencing say to you about the Me Too movement?
Nothing. It says nothing to me about the Me Too movement, other than the fact that the judge probably felt some type of pressure.
About the unsealing of the documents, do you feel like any of that was improper? Like those documents should not have been unsealed?
Well, I think at this point that's really up to the court in terms of what they unseal. I think what was improper about it, I think that's a fair question. I think what was improper was the timing. Just as he was indicted in California the day before we're picking a jury here, all of these timings seem to be quite interesting in terms of Mr. Weinstein. Yeah, serendipitous, and they want us to believe that they're coincidental, but I don't think that they are. I think in some ways releasing those documents yesterday gives the judge, a greater leg to stand on.
He wasn't treated fairly at all. Let's just call it what it is. Not by the court, not by the jury, not by a lot of you. That's what happened. All right. The evidence in this case, we firmly believe, did not establish his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about anything else than whether there was reasonable doubt in this case. And to say that there wasn't, based on the defense that we put forward, I think is outrageous. And that's how we all feel about this case. Everywhere. From you, from the public, not from you personally, ma'am. You've been very nice. But from everywhere. Think about it. We're in the middle of jury selection. There's a flash mob outside chanting. And the judge is saying, well, people outside chant all the time. Well, not when Harvey Weinstein's on trial. Every single step of this case was engineered for this moment right here. And for people not to accept that, I find pretty disingenuous. You might not agree with it, but to say that didn't play a role, that these jurors who are only human beings who tried to do the best they can, didn't hear what was going on in the media, didn't see what was going on. Let's live in reality. That's where we need to live in this case.
Can you summarize what the appeal basis will be on?
I did that about 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
Well, the three said that. Yeah, that's correct. And I think that what's problematic about that is the fact that that was 90% of the evidence in the case. And so to disregard that, I think is difficult for us to deal with, because that was most of the evidence.
And it was relevant evidence.
Correct.
It was relevant evidence that went to determine how these relationships existed. And to only look at one portion of it and not look at the rest of it, it's like watching 5 minutes of a movie and then trying to explain what that movie was all about. You can't do that. So that's what we had a problem with that. We did the best we could, as you all know, to explain these relationships the best we could by showing these emails, by showing these statements that these individuals made. The jury rejected it. There's nothing we can do about that. We would have tried the case the same way, and a different set of jurors may have said no. because a lot of the individuals that we talk to say, we have a problem with this verdict based on those communications.
Stephen, if Harvey is guilty of what he's been found guilty of, do you think redemption is possible?
I think redemption is possible for anybody, whether or not he was convicted or acquitted. I think if Harvey Weinstein was found not guilty of these charges, he would still be remorseful for some of the decisions he made in his life. I think that redemption is something that everybody strives for in one way or the other. But I don't think when he said redemption today, he was talking about because he's guilty of these charges. I think that he'd be the first one to admit, as he did today, that he could have spent more time with his family, that he wasn't always the nicest person in the world. I mean, the prosecutor tried to bring up temper tantrums that he threw in the 70s as aggravation at a sentencing hearing. I mean, come on.
Were there any members of his family?
No.
No, and the reason is because if they come, their face is splattered in the news and they're written about and they're not left alone. And so Harvey asked that everybody stay away so they didn't have to endure that. So, you know, there's a double-edged sword to all of this. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fine.
We get tons of requests.
Jeremy, Jeremy, do you know if there's a presser for the 6 women? You don't know? Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Almost finished?
Left side, all you need to do is help.
Okay.
Oh no, did you?
Down? Up? Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. All right. Gloria, talk about that song. Okay. This is what justice looks like. 20 plus 3 years sentence handed down by Judge Burke this morning after compelling arguments by the prosecution and after arguments by the defense. And most importantly, after heartfelt victim impact statements, one by my client Mimi and the other by the victim Jessica. I was in court. It was very emotional for my clients. Each and every one of my clients, Mimi, Lauren, Annabella, were all crying. Here is just the last part of what Mimi said in her victim impact statement. She said, "I've never felt vengeful, and going into this initially, I didn't even feel anger. I just felt sad. Sad for myself, sad for everyone he hurt, and I even felt sad for him for having done this to himself. But I have observed an indifference, a lack of remorse a lack of acknowledgement, a lack of awareness and self-awareness by the defendant throughout this process that has made me feel anger, that has left me concerned that he is completely disconnected from the gravity of the crime that he committed against me and the impact it's had. I can only hope that whatever sentence the court sees fit is long enough for Harvey Weinstein to acknowledge what he's done and to be truly sorry. And I think, and this is my opinion, that this sentence is long enough for him at least to begin to understand what he's done. Whether he will ever be truly sorry, I don't know.
What did you think of his statement?
But his statement was rambling. He had a right to make it. He indicated some remorse, whether it was heartfelt, whether it was remorse for having been convicted, having been sentenced to prison, or expecting to be sentenced to prison, I don't know. But I'm really not concerned about Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein, I will see again, because I will see him again in Los Angeles, because the Los Angeles case, the criminal case against Mr. Weinstein, will move forward. I have every reason to believe there'll be a very speedy attempt to extradite him. Don't know whether he will fight extradition. If he does, I don't know on what grounds, but we'll have to see. But as I have indicated previously, I represent Lauren, who was one of the Molyneux witnesses in this case, and she is one of the two victims for whom charges have been filed in Los Angeles. So she will be testifying there as well, and I'll be representing her there as well. So I want to say that Rosie Perez, who was sitting next to me in court, and who is being extremely supportive of her dear friend Annabella, and who gave very, very compelling and strong and courageous testimony, asked me to say that she feels that this is for all sexual assault victims. And she feels their voices are now being heard. And it was very emotional for Rosie in court as well. So I would like to say that I do think it's, in my opinion, a fair and appropriate sentence. He was afforded due process. He had 5 defense attorneys sitting in court almost every day. Most defendants cannot afford even one private defense attorney. So he got all the due process that anyone could get and more, because his attorneys demanded it, and I believe that they got it.
What do you think about what he said about men being confused?
Men being confused. Well, maybe he's confused. I don't know if he's speaking for all men. I don't know that he would have a vote from all men to be their messenger, but I will say this. If you are a sexual predator and you are confused, all you have to do is remember this: 20 plus 3 years. And part of the consideration in handing down a sentence by a court to a person convicted of felonies is to consider the deterrent effect. So for all those who are still preying on women, who want to engage in the high risk taking of harming women and thinking you'll get away with it, that gamble is likely not to pay off for you anymore. And if you're a high profile figure, don't expect anything but equal justice. Don't expect more than equal justice under the law. I'm very emotional because I'm feeling the emotions of my clients. I know what they've been through. I know what they've been through when they testified. I know how it has been for them behind the scenes. I know how hard it has been for them. But they have faced their fears. and they have shown courage. And as Susan B. Anthony has said, courage is the best protection a woman can have. And because of their courage, and because of the voices of so many other women speaking out, there is finally as much justice as is possible in this case.
Can you tell us, does it represent having all of those women together in that room, walking in that room, being there in concert, further from being in the shadows where this case was?
All of the 6 witnesses called by the prosecution were in the courtroom this morning. They were also, I was just with all of them as well, and also prior to their coming down. Many of them are still processing the sentence. They're just overwhelmed and still trying to understand it. But I have expressed to the district attorney and to Cyrus Vance and to Jonah Luzzi and to Megan how very professional they were. I do feel that this New York prosecutor engaged in a big risk when he took this case because it was an unusual case. It involved persons who were acquaintances. It was not a stranger in a dark alley rape case. It involved witnesses who sometimes had communication with the defendant afterwards. This is very unusual. And it's against a powerful figure. But the empowerment of women met the power in the courtroom, and the district attorney took that risk, and I thanked him for that.
What's next for the victim?
What's tomorrow for this women? For these women, well, we'll have to see. I think they're taking it day by day at this point.
Is this a victory?
Nobody will be coming out right now. I think they have all left the courthouse.
Is it the victory of the Me Too movement?
Pardon me?
Is it the victory of the Me Too movement?
Pourquoi pas? This is a case, and it had to be judged by the evidence admitted in the courtroom. But obviously, we are living in an age when women are no longer willing to suffer in silence. They are going to be courageous. They are going to be empowered, not just in New York, not just in the United States, but I'm feeling it many places around the world. Women are going to speak out and demand justice from those who are sexually preying on them in the workplace, in their home, everywhere, in the sports world, in the entertainment world, in the business world, in the religious world, in every world where they walk. And they're going to demand respect and dignity, and most of all, justice, because justice has been far behind in terms of meeting the needs and the rights of women. We can talk out about victimization of women, but unless there's serious consequences for those who commit criminal acts against women, it will mean nothing. And now there are consequences to be remembered, and more potential consequences for Mr. Weinstein in the future. I don't fail to give him credit for some of the things that his defense attorney said that he should get credit for. Okay, if he contributed to good causes, if he helped other people in their careers, and whatever else he has done. But he's convicted of a violent felony against my client. He got 20 years for criminal sexual assault of my client, Mimi. Potentially 3 years, it's not 100% clear, for rape in the third degree against Jessica, whom I do not represent. This is a new day. It's a new day for women to know that if you have courage, there will be consequences for the predators who hurt you. So for the predators who are going to wake up in fear tomorrow and say, are they coming after me next? My answer is probably yes.
Gloria, I have a question. One of the jurors said that, they had thought, even if you had made a mistake,
The question, for those of you who couldn't hear it, is that a male juror said that even if Mimi had made a mistake in going to Mr. Weinstein, aka the convicted felon's apartment, that she didn't deserve to be assaulted. I think this is very important because Ms. Rotuno, one of the members of Mr. Weinstein's defense team, has said when she was asked about sexual assault, and she said she hadn't been sexually assaulted, she wouldn't put herself in that position. Mimi did not put herself in a position to be assaulted. Women have a right to go to someone's home, to someone's apartment, to someone's hotel, to someone's place of business, anywhere and everywhere, and they do not have to expect that if they go there, they will be raped. They will be victimized by criminal sexual assault. This is wrong to victim blame. And even though defense said they weren't victim blaming, they weren't victim shaming, what they said speaks for itself. And Mimi in her statement said she had no reason to believe that would happen. She had no reason to expect that. He had never committed an act of violence against her prior to that. And she thought that his rejection of his advances previous to that meant that her rejection of his advances meant that he understood that she would not be interested in any kind of sexual interaction with him. Somebody else here? Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. I only have a few. Who asked for it? Okay, all right. Okay, yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right, come up with me here. Hi. Our client, Tarley Wolf, appeared as a Molyneux witness in Harvey Weinstein's trial, but because she was not a named victim, today she was not able to give a victim impact statement in the courtroom, but she does have a statement, and she'd like to read it to you now.
Thank you. Pardon me if I bounce around a little bit, but after I was raped by Weinstein in 2005, I was confused. Why didn't I scream? Why didn't I fight? I thought I was stronger, and I hated myself for being weak. That self-hate turned into shame and guilt. Shame that I never should have felt, and guilt that was not mine to own. I didn't know that at the time, and I didn't realize it for 12 more years. Harvey Weinstein stole a part of my self-worth, treating me like I was nothing, and I became fearful and mistrustful, not only of others, but of myself. These feelings were unbearable to live with, and I pushed back the fear, shame, and guilt to move on with my life, because that's how most of us survive. I was okay, or so I thought, until I read about the brave women speaking out with their stories just like mine. The heartbreak of shame and guilt came flooding back. I knew what those women felt, and I wanted to help them. I knew I had to. It didn't occur to me for quite some time that I might actually start to heal from being sexually assaulted. My single intention was to help survivors hold Weinstein accountable for his disgusting crimes. As I began my quest to help others, I was introduced to several incredible people that made me realize that I am also worth standing up for. My first encounter with the Manhattan DA's office was with Martha Bashford. She was compassionate and the first person to point out that I was still affected by my experience and encouraged me to seek help. And I am forever grateful to Jonah Luzzi Orban and Megan Hast for continuing the pursuit of justice, and for always believing in me. They are examples of the intelligent, fearless women that I look up to. My lawyers at Wigdor LLP guided me legally and supported me personally over the last 2 years. And to Douglas Wigdor, Jeannie Christensen, and Lindsay Goldbroom, I am indebted to you for the countless hours you've given me. You've played a pivotal role in my life, and I'm unbelievably grateful that you didn't allow me to quit on myself. And I thank Ali Salwa of Mount Sinai's Savvy program and New York City's Family Justice Center. You have been both a therapist and friend. Your patience, empathy, intelligence, and strength are immeasurable. You've helped me to find a deeper love of myself and began redefining my own life. Testifying was surreal. Mentally, I was nervous and intimidated, but I knew in my heart that I had my truth, and no matter what anyone else said to me, I would go home with my truth. But the overwhelming fear was that there was more at stake than me. I was there to help Mimi and Jessica. What if my emotions got in the way and I couldn't speak, or worse, I might not be able to remember everything under the pressure of intense questioning? Today, when Judge Burke said, before the entire word 20 came out of his mouth, my head just went into my hands, and I couldn't believe what I was about to hear. No one thought we'd be here today. No one thought Harvey would ever see a courtroom. And even still, no one gave him more than 10 or 12 years. And when Judge Burke said 20, for the first time I can say, I feel a sense of happiness, I guess. Because this isn't a happy circumstance to be that we're all here for. But I feel joyous with what Judge Burke decided, and I'm grateful to the jurors and the prosecuting team, the DA's office, and everybody involved.